Hello, welcome back to Loutzen Academy. In this week's video, we'll be demonstrating how to use a value scale in an underpainting. A value scale is usually a scale from 1 to 10 showing black and white shades in a range, and it's beneficial to use a value scale as you are working through your underpaintings. So this week we'll be painting my good boy Kai, which we have a finished value scale here with the detail work. And we're going to be using an underpainting called grisaille. It is a underpainting technique used by Renaissance masters. They use a black and white value scale to create these underpainting, and then they add color by adding a glazing technique above it. So usually my underpaintings tend to be a burnt sienna wash with an acrylic medium. I like to start with my underpaintings in acrylic because they dry really fast and you can paint oil above it. But you cannot paint acrylic over oil just because it does not stick well, and the different drying times has an effect and will cause cracking into your canvas. I use acrylic medium wash with burnt sienna, and then I like to mix alizarin crimson with a phthalo green to create a beautiful black with a purple undertone. And using that mixture between the alizarin crimson and the phthalo green, that's how I build up my values, going from the shadows into my lighter values. Using this technique is a great technique, but I did notice recently that my paintings have been looking flat. It is best to go back to the basics and look back towards our Renaissance masters and practice this grisaille underpainting technique. Used an acrylic medium mix with burnt sienna as a wash to neutralize the canvas, but the rest of the underpainting will be in oils. And the Renaissance masters really like using oil as an underpainting because the oil's ability to shine through the transparencies of the glazing. I did wrote a Substack going into detail of the technique. I'll link it down below. So there are multiple underpainting techniques other than grisaille using the black and white underpainting. Also brunet, which is a brown undertone painting. And then we have verdacho, which is a green undertone painting. And I believe my usual underpainting works as a mixture between the brunet and verdacho. But for the purposes of this video, I'm trying to show how a value scale can really shape a form in your underpainting. We're going to be using the grisaille. And additionally, the Renaissance painters did put a lot of effort into their underpainting works. They treated it as a finished piece in itself. So we'll be trying to replicate that as well, because the finished underpainting will be showing through the glazes. Like cafecito, we have a double shot espresso with some honey, and we will start with this initial sketch. I am using a softer willow charcoal, and in my first video I demonstrate the benefits of willow charcoal and using it as a sketch, and then I place a fixative above it too so that we can start painting over it. Starting with the initial sketch with a used canvas, I used a double layer of gesso to paint over the canvas. And I don't mind when it comes to studies reusing old artworks. This was a color study, and I just decided to just save some canvases and just get two layers of gesso on it. I'm using willow charcoal, and in my first video I did demonstrate the benefits of a softer charcoal for your initial sketch. It gives the artist less pressure to make the perfect line, and unlike my first video, I am sighting and using and measuring my proportions a bit better. So you can see that I have multiple lines through his body, and that's meant to be a measurement for his head, and using his head as a measuring tool. And even then you could see as I work through the portrait, I keep on remeasuring it, readjusting. So that's the benefit of the soft charcoal in itself, is that if the measurements aren't there, we can always erase it. So the initial sketch is going to be a soft charcoal, And I'm going to use a fixative to spray on it. I suggest to spray outside with the mask on, and it is meant to make sure that the soft charcoal doesn't erase. I also have a disclaimer to make. During the value color mixing process I'll be showing in a couple minutes, I do use vocabulary interchangeably. So when I'm talking about tone, tone can be used talking about values as well. So how dark or how light a color is. It also can be used to describe a color. So this specific green may have a warmer undertone, or like I said earlier with the alizarin crimson and that phthalo green mixture having a purple tone. So we do use a tone interchangeably. And a lot of the times when I talk about temperature, I'm just talking about the temperature of a color. There's warm colors and cool colors within the color value scale. And these warm colors tend to be red, yellow, and orange. And the cool colors tend to be blue, green, and purple. And there are some colors that you may think is a warm color, but it might have a cooler undertone. So let's say there's like a purple undertone, then it pushes the color into the cooler side of the color theory scale or of the color wheel. So just a quick little disclaimer when it paints to the value scale, there is going to be a lot of vocabulary spoken interchangeably. Now that we have the initial sketch down, we'll move on to painting value. Hello, so we are going to be working on a value scale with this portrait. This is a portrait of our dog Kai, and this is the perfect portrait in my opinion because he looks so regal and he's standing tall. So we're going to do a value study with this portrait so I can have a better understanding before we decide to paint him on a larger scale. So right here we have our value scale. I printed out 2 of these value scales, one so that I can place it next to the portrait as I paint, and this one which is underneath my mixing palette that we can see the paints near the mixing palette. And this value scale is cut from toadhollowstudio.com, and I just printed 2 and just cut this one out. So the paints we're going to be using is going to be oil paints, a variety of different types of companies. So my go-to is titanium white. I use this big boy because I use a lot of white in my paintings. And we also have this one too as well, so you can see a better, clearer version of it. There'll be a titanium white. Then for our blacks, my go-to is ivory black. It has a warmer base color and a brown undercolor, and this is great for underpainting. It dries fast, and the brown warmer color is perfect because black tends to get very cool quickly, but since we do have just a little bit, I thought we had way more of this specific paint. We also have lamp black that we might want to play with, but for now we're going to work with this titanium black. Lamp black has a cooler tone and a blue underbase, but it does take a lot longer to dry. And I believe our lamp black is a darker black because since it's cooler, it gets pushed away from the viewer as a warmer blacks gets pushed towards the viewer. So we may or may not use this lamp black, but hopefully our ivory black lasts as long as it can. I like to use these to mix instead of paintbrushes because the paintbrushes absorb the paint, and this tool is very nice because you could easily slide off the paint. I may not use some cadmium yellow. As we get higher into the value scale, it does get warmer, I would say, and sometimes our titanium white is a cooler color, so adding some cadmium yellow light may neutralize that color, but it's going to be very subtle and may not happen as often. So going back to this portrait of Kai and using my second value scale, I'm going to look for the darkest color here, which for my eyes, I'm thinking it's going to be where his ear is at, where his collar is at. I'm not focusing in the background as much. I'm more interested in what we're seeing on the object itself. So going towards my value scale, I'm going to assume it's going to be a 10. And looking closely, it is quite there. See if you guys are able to see that. So it could be a 9, or a 10. I believe the 10 pushes it a little bit more. Not sure if on the lighting is kind of tricking the eye right now since we have multiple sources of light. And this might be the black that's underneath, that's on the portrait itself, might be a cooler black, so it might be a lot darker than this 10 right here. But looking just with my eyes, this is probably the darkest we're gonna get, and it might be a little bit darker right here. So I'm gonna look at the lightest value on Kai. Other than the highlights, we have a couple of highlights, one on his nose right here. That's gonna be our whitest white. And we might have a little bit of highlight in his eyes, but his fur is not the lightest white that we have. And putting it against the value scale, I'm assuming it's gonna be a 2. So we're looking at the 2 right here. And maybe right here might be very close. Going up right here, the color shifts just a little bit. If you wanna, yeah, going right here, we might be able to see that right there, might be a 2. So that's gonna be my lightest light other than my highlight. And we have these in-between colors, which is going to be quite difficult because his fur, you can see it, the pattern oscillates between a light and a dark. But right here, this doesn't look like the darkest dark as right here. So we might see him more at I believe maybe a 7 or an 8 in the value scale. Like this dark right here, there's like an 8. And then this one right here might look like a 6. It's very tricky because it does oscillate. I'm not too interested in trying to get every detail of value on this portrait, especially with an animal, because the fur does create that movement back and forth between light and dark. What I'm interested in this underpainting is just blocking in values. So let's start. So the colors that we're going to try to copy is going to be a 10, an 8, a 7, and a 2. We might come back and see if we could get any more in between values, but 10, 8, 7, and a 2 I believe is going to be our best bet. Afraid to use a lot of your paint colors because you are going to need it. So I'm going to place the paint right at the top. This has been a while since I've used this one and the cap fell off, so luckily oil paints tend to dry faster at its surface, but underneath it takes a very long time to dry. So in a way the oil paint acts as a cap in itself, but I just advise just to keep this area clean and try to close the top of the paint as nicely as you can. And then let's go with our ivory black first. Maybe the lamp black might give us this 10 value, or even pushes up to a higher value that's not on the scale, or darker value that's not on the scale for his ear. But let's do some ivory black, which I'm actually going to use this one. It has a little bit of life in it left, so. And I am quite nervous about this right now because I don't have a lot of ivory black, and we're going to be using a lot of black, and it's good to have enough of that material because you can experiment and mess around. So we're going to be very careful with this, or at least try to be more intentional. I do tend to use a lot of paint and end up not using it all, so trying to get like a toothpaste. So I laid out my paint colors. This is our titanium white. This is our ivory black. In the corners, I wanted to push them off of the palette just because I don't want to use too much of each. We have the cadmium yellow light, and we have the lamp black. And I think you could kind of see how much deeper and richer this lamp black is compared to this ivory black. So we're going to start with our 10, right? And looking at it right off the back, if you could see, it is quite there, but I think this 10 might be, it could be a little bit lighter and warmer. I'm not sure if you guys are able to see it on, but let's mix it with a little bit of white and see how well that picks up on the camera, because we do see this is very dark, and this might be beneficial for the ear itself, but maybe in some areas we do want to get this dark there. So, and spread it out too so we can have a better idea of how well it looks on the glass. See right here, it does actually look pretty nice and deep, but let's add a little bit of this white right here. See if that does anything. And when you add the white, you could kind of see for a moment the brown undertones push through, but then the white overpowers that brown undertone as you mix the paint. Oh yeah, I like that a lot better. Let's see. Might be more in the 9, 10 area. Add a little bit of black, just add some more color in there. Maybe I do want to add a little bit more, because with this painting we are going to need a lot of it. So I tend to be a little bit more afraid of trying to pull out too much of the painting, but as I paint I realized I needed a lot more, and then I had to go back and mix it. Let's add a little bit of that white. I'm trying to see if this looks better with the lighting, or if the lighting is working against us or not. Make sure you want to see right here with these streaks, you do see the brown undertone with it, which is very good for an underpainting. It dries faster and it looks warmer, because black tends to run cool, especially when you mix it with the titanium white, which is a lot cooler. Okay, let's see how well that looks right there. Looks about white, right? We added some thickness to it by adding the titanium white. So I'm just gonna pull this off to the side. Try to get as much as I can off right here. Looking at it through the camera might seem a little bit darker, but that is fine, because we were looking at his ear and we did see it pushed a little bit beyond the scale. And I might want to add a little bit more, so I might pull this back and mix it just to make sure it's quite similar, but if not, I could just add it on top. You see, when you spread it out, you see this white, hopefully it picks up on the camera, but this white right here, you can see how much it cools down this black. Similar, yeah, looks about right. And now I'm gonna try to get this off as much as I can. Since we're working from dark to light, you can use leftover paint from the value before, which is gonna be helpful, and just add more white. So the next color we're gonna jump to is gonna be this 8, which might be a lot lighter than this, obviously, because we were just working on the 10. Actually might be quite there already. It's such a subtle difference. You see this 10. The 10 is just cooler than this 8. But it does, on camera, it does look the same. A little bit more of this white. You might be able to see it better. And if not, we just might have to go back to this 10 right here and just push a little bit further, which might be beneficial using the lamp black. To white. Let's mix that in. See, this is starting to push more into a 7. Especially if I add more white. So if anything, we're gonna probably keep it as close to this black as possible and add more of this lamp black shade just to push this 10 further, so we can at least have some type of difference between the 10 and the 8. It looks very similar, but the 8 does have more of a warmer tone. So the lamp black may be beneficial just to add it to that 10. But let's try to get very close first before we make that decision. Add more black. Ooh, I'm very, very nervous because I feel like I'm already running out of the black. I really hope the colors or the values really translate over the camera. I know that iPhones tend to color correct a lot of things, so I just hope it just doesn't look the same to everybody and they're like, what is she talking about? But to my eye, I do see somewhat of a difference. Okay, let's get this over here. See, yeah, you can see it a little bit better. See the black right here. Before it was going towards a 7, but I'm adding more black, made it back to an 8. And I'm thinking pushing this black back up. So let's just get as much as we can from this one. No paint left behind here. Looks like I have a little bit of a lint in here too, which is good. So if we're gonna go back up to this paint, usually I'll wipe this off and then before mixing it back with this color or with this darker value. But since we are gonna add a lamp black, I feel like the lamp just gonna overpower so much of the paint. So let's see how it looks with the lamp black. And you know what? Let's take half of that, put it off to the side, just to save this paint, just in case I do not like how the lamp black looks. So I'm gonna take this black. It has a little bit of white in it, but more of the ivory black in it. I'm gonna take this lamp black right here. Take this much and add it and see. Well, let's put it to the side. Yeah, you see the difference? This is such a cooler black that it like pushes away from the viewer. So I wonder if I'm mixing it, and you could kind of see the blue undertone when you mix in it. So we'll see how black is black. And this black might get darker than the 10 value, which is okay because we did see that the ear was pushing a little bit darker. Oh yeah, you could see that much of a difference. And it is just a richer color. So with that being said, I think I'll be okay with pushing it towards a 10, maybe even an 11, but it might need to be a little bit warmer. But we'll see. Maybe if we add more of this right here. We add more of this, and you see how little lamp black I added and the difference it made between this 8 and this 10 right here. Yeah, you could see this is such a deeper black, which is good. It worked out. And since a lot of Kai's values isn't that darker, much darker. Let's see over here. See, this looks just like very deep. This is a very deep black. Maybe even too black, but it's okay. As long as we get our values in, and you can kind of see the difference between this and this, I hope. Maybe on a camera it doesn't translate, but this looks blue, a lot bluer, cooler, and this looks a lot warmer. So this time I'm gonna add a lot more white, because I might push it a lot faster. Ooh, I think we're getting a 5 actually. Let's see. Yeah, look how blue that became because of the titanium white. And as we get closer to our lighter values, you will see when I add the yellow how much it warms it down. Especially on a 2. On a 2, we might see some yellow in it. Okay, this is looking more like a 3 and a 4. So let's bring it back to a 6. Add more. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more. See how hard it is to bring it back to a darker color once you add too much white? Need a little bit more black. Ooh, looks like I am just right there. Just close enough. Thinking might be a little bit more black. This looks a little bit warmer if we add more of the black. Well, the black is a warmer black, but let's see. Let's add a little bit more black. Let's see if that does anything for us. It's close enough. Just right there. Yep, that looks right there. Okay, let me mix the color even more just to make sure we don't have any. Yep, next, almost quite there. Ooh, on the camera it doesn't. See, on the camera it looks a lot lighter. And my eyes could be wrong, that's for sure. That for sure could be a thing. But when I look at it, you know what? This has more of a cooler tone. I don't want to add white because it's gonna add, let's say, it's gonna make it lighter in the value scale. If I add a little bit of this lamp black, it might cool it down, but I'm afraid that it might darken it too much. So let's just add the tiniest bit, just the tip right here. See how much that makes a difference. And it's funny because most people don't realize that black and white have its own colors within it, right? So if you mix a lot of colors together, you get black, right? And then you take away colors, you get white, obviously. But this is a great lesson to see that even in the value scale, as it goes up higher, you do see a shift between if it's going to be warmer or cooler. Ooh, did that get darker? Let's see how much darker that got. And then now I'm going to be fighting with this one because, see, oh, let me turn that around. Oh yeah, you see a little bit better. Might need a little bit of white, but I'm so scared to add some white. Let's do a little bit, just the tiniest piece. Okay, let's see how much that cools it down. starting to look more like a 7, but we'll see. It's all in the mixing. That might be better. Let's see. Yep, that did it. As much as we can off. Yeah, that's as close as that's gonna get. Obviously, the texture of the matte value scale and then the glossiness of the oil, you're gonna see some light in it that's not gonna look similar. Okay, moving on, we're going towards this 5 right here. So let's see, we're gonna add a bit of this ivory black, or a lot of it. And it's gonna need a lot more white, so let's just cut this much right here. I'm thinking once we shift from the 5s and the 4s above, this is where we start seeing the cadmium yellow play its part. But for now, I think we'll be fine with this 5. This 5 was probably the easiest one to do. It's it's almost there. Maybe a little bit more white. So we did end up mixing a little bit of the cadmium yellow light into this 5. That got it really close. Starting off of what we had right here, I'm just gonna use the leftover right here and add some white. And I might add some yellow in this as well. But yeah, starting at the 5, that's when we started seeing the shift between using ivory black to cool down the value and now using cadmium yellow light to make it a bit warmer. See if that actually made it quite there. Ooh, that looks almost there. It needs a little bit of white. And I don't know if it's funny seeing how aggressively I'm trying to get this done, but hopefully accurately. Thinking I'm having trouble because instead of adding more warmer tones, I'm playing a risky game right now. Guess not that risky because I didn't use a lot of that black, but it did cool down this a lot, which I was assuming we're going to be using a lot more yellows in this, but we actually used a little bit of the ivory black to cool it down to get it really close. Just right there, almost there. Let's see. That's pretty close. I don't know if you guys could tell the difference, but that is right there, just right there. Okay, so now that I have a mixture between the ivory black, the titanium white, the cadmium yellow, and this matte black, I might just use the same mixture but add more white. And you might have to warm it up a bit with some yellow, but yep, that looks about right. We have a little bit more of mixing to do. You see the white coming out on that last grape. But all the hard work I did on the 4th one made this one a little bit easier. Just a tad bit. Okay, and in our last value scale that we're looking at, other than our highlights, is going to be our lightest value, and it's going to be this number 2 right here. I'm going to do the same thing I did with number 3. Just use any leftovers I have and add a lot more white to it. And this might be almost there, actually. I was thinking that we might add a little bit of yellow in this mix, but it might be just right there. Let me just mix more of the white in there. Just put it right here. And that looks really, really close. Thinking, yeah, no, I don't even want to think anymore. I think that looks quite right there. Let's see if we bring it closer to the camera, we could see a little bit better. Yeah, that looks just about right there. I was thinking we might need it to add a little bit more of that yellow, but it looks like it's just right there. So we're gonna start going into our value scale with the paint itself. Now that we have our value scales on our palette, we are going to create a burnt sienna wash with acrylic medium and wash it along the sketch that we have to neutralize this. I like to use a neutralized canvas when working with these paints because it's helpful for the eye to see which areas are missing paints, and the white canvas in itself will trick our own eyes when we're trying to work through these value scale. So right here you could see me working in the darkest values. I suggest to use the darkest values first. I think those are for our eyes to recognize. And you see I am still using that value scale, making it against the reference photo, and then applying it to the portrait itself. Additionally, I used a different angle for the camera. I noticed since oil paints do give off a illuminating factor, a lot of the lighting is hard to pick up and off of the camera, so I decided to flip it over and hopefully give it a better viewing experience. But as right now, we are just blocking in these values, so start with your darkest values, and I suggest to go in there with the background as well. Figure out the values in the background just so that you can get as much paint on the canvas as possible. And don't be afraid to put in as much paint in the background as you can. You can see that I still have some of the burnt sienna pushing through, so it will take some layers. I'm also using a paint thinner so that I can spread the paint a lot further than it would without a paint thinner. But so we are currently in our value scale. I believe this is our fourth or fifth value on the value scale, and we're just treating this as a mosaic. So I'm not interested as of right now blending in between values. I just want to get as much of the values I can onto the portrait itself. And the more you do it, you do realize it your eyes in a way tend to naturally blur values together like a camera. And so even just doing it in a mosaic style, you start seeing the form coming out, and I think that's pretty neat. So right here you see I'm getting pretty much higher into the scale, trying to get into the darker shadows of his face. I do suggest to look into reflected light and shadow, that shadows don't have light in it, but does. And there's a shadow that usually comes along right here where it's like a reflection of the light bouncing off from the chest, and people tend to miss this reflected light a lot, and it's a lot lighter than you think it will be on the value scale. So you could see this coming up when I paint Sky's face and his shadow. Where that 5 is where that reflected light underneath his nose on the left hand side. You see a little bit of that reflected light, and it is going to be a lot lighter than the shadows around his face. You go a little bit more into the detail work, but as of right now, with just the mosaic, I'm not too focused on getting the details in. I just wanted to get the values down to demonstrate how far a value scale can push your image. You see, this is when all the values are on the portrait itself. I don't see any burnt sienna pushing through. Maybe there needs to be a second layer in that background, but for the most part, you can see in the portrait itself that we covered most of the brown. So right now we're looking at the portrait with the value scale placed out in a mosaic pattern. I suggest for blending, we could get a hog hair brush and blend X brush strokes between the two. I decided to take a break to introduce the boys. They're a bit happy to be on the couch right now. Do you have anything to say? Okay. So this is Kai. This is Kai. He's the one that's our regal gentleman in the portrait. And right behind me, if they could stop playing, they're fighting for my attention right now. So I don't usually let them on the couch unless I have this blanket because they love being outside. Okay, Dizzy, come in. So this is Dizzy, and you see how they fight with each other. So with Kai and Dizzy, it was a very nice story how they came into our possessions as our children, and so me and my husband we were planning to get two dogs anyways, but we wanted to build a fence line between our around our property to keep them in. Sir, you're on live TV. Don't be doing that. It's inappropriate. Okay, they're all relaxed now. So we wanted to originally get two dogs anyways, and I love German Shepherds. I grew up with German Shepherds. I had a good girl named Skyla, which I'll put her right here because she deserves her 5 seconds of fame. And I have something to say. And I just grew up with them, so I love German Shepherds. So in my mind, I was like, we're getting German Shepherds. My husband, he loves all dogs, so I think he was okay with any dog that he wanted. And so on my way home on Memorial Day, we do have a 30-minute dead spot on one of the roads that we take, and my car started acting up right before the dead stop. So I got on the phone with my husband and let him know, hey, my car's gonna break down right now. I need you to come get me and get AAA. So by the time we hung up the phone, the dead's no phone connection at all. So I was just sitting and waiting for him. So when he came, he said that AAA said that we could go home while we wait for the tow truck because it's gonna take about 2 hours. So on our drive home in the pitch black, it's dark, no service. We see these two little guys. They're babies. They were probably 6 months at the time, and they're just roaming around. Dizzy was very, very skinny, and Kai, he had an injury on his head. And so we decided to take them in. We looked around to see if anyone was looking for dogs, but in that area, it is definitely a place not for dogs. It's a lot of wilderness and a lot of properties. Hey, okay, bye. It's a wilderness and a lot of property that is harmful to puppies. So we decided to just snatch them up. And since then, they've been with us. And I just thought it was perfect timing, even though we didn't have the fence up at the time. It was just, we were thinking about having these two boys anyways. And the fact that they were German Shepherds kind of worked out. So Kai wants to come. Come on, Kai. Come on, Kai. Come on. Come on. He's being shy right now. Come on. Okay, there you go. So this is Kai. Dizzy ran out because he's kind of the crackhead out of the two and he can't just focus. And he is our star of today. So you have anything to say? You have anything to say? Kick the boys back out after Kai's terrible PR stunt, and my mic is working now. And we're going to be looking over the final portrait. I didn't record this part of the portrait. I really wanted to focus in on the detail work and not worry too much about how the camera is looking. So we added a fur above the value scale. I waited a week for the original value scale to dry just so that we can get into the details of the fur using a very tiny brush. The lightest value I can. I added some titanium white with some cadmium yellow light, and I just used that to do all of the fur detailing. And then I went back in with the darkest dark to more detail work in his face. And I feel like this is a very good portrait to start off the glazing process. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope the value scale was a good reference. And if not, I just thanks for hanging out with me. And to my 2 subscribers, thank you. So if you have any questions, just comment below. I also have the Substack article going into more depth of the Renaissance artists who value putting values up down on a grayscale grisaille underpainting, and just showing that a lot of the artists did value putting a lot of work onto the underpainting as if it was a finished product in itself. So have a good week.